What's the most important founding decision that's allowed you to disrupt this market?
90% of businesses over 10 people have a CRM. It is a huge, huge, huge market. How do we build brand recognition in a very entrenched market? Software malleability and configuration is going to completely change. If you were excited about no-code, this is the real no-code moment. It was massive, massive, massive shift. And so we sketched out this product. I can literally remember saying these words to Alex. I said to him, wouldn't it be super annoying if we saw a YC company do this? And he was like, dude, that would just drive me insane. Well, let's not let that happen. Let's build it.
At Attio, you're disrupting a huge market. You're going up against competitors worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And in only a few years, you've been able to service thousands of customers, raise $60+ million. I want to ask you, what's the most important founding decision you made when you decided to start Attio that's allowed you to disrupt this market?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question, and there are annoyingly two answers.
All right, let's go. Let's do it.
They're both very important.
Okay.
So hopefully, kind of interesting topics in themselves. But number one was choosing my co-founder. So Alex, who has been with Attio, joined Funstack. Which we'll talk about, which is the company previous to Attio, joined sort of a few months into that, but was there for the founding day of Attio. And having him as a co-founder was kind of totally pivotal to our success. And so really, really important, it's kind of as big as a marriage in the business world, right? This is like, the most important person in the company. So that was really big decision and a good one.
Yeah.
The second one was essentially our decision, which was hard at the time because it sort of goes against a lot of the sort of pervasive wisdom about how to build companies, especially startups. Was that we didn't launch the product for 3 years, and I'll go into all the reasons why that was, but kind of the opposite of be embarrassed about your product, get it into the world as quickly as possible, iterate, try and make $1 within, get your first customers within 3 months.
Yeah.
We didn't do that at all.
Wow. How'd you know that was the right decision?
We knew it was the right decision because we had this, at that point, we were absolutely like maniacally focused on building a CRM. And we knew that it would not be possible to build an MVP of the product we wanted to in 3 years. And we also knew that a lot of CRMs that did manage to get to market, got some early traction, failed to like really scale over time. And largely that was because they hit massive barriers in the way that they'd been built. And so we had these really big ideas about the data structure, the flexibility, the foundations of a product we wanted to build. And we just couldn't build it quickly. We didn't think it would be 3 years. Yeah. We actually thought it would be like 12 months, maybe 18 months. But 18 months in, we were still building.
Yeah.
And we did start to go and get customers. So, quite early we started to onboard people, et cetera. And we would kind of watch them initially fail with the product and all that kind of stuff. But we didn't charge them for that. We didn't have a website for a really long time. So it's kind of very like hand-to-hand type stuff. And yeah, three years until we actually went kind of general access GA.
Yeah, you did have all those customers before going wide. What was the process like of deciding to actually go and launch?
Yeah, so we had there were a few metrics that we were keeping track of. So the first was, could we get people to use the product every day? And what we were looking for there was the ratio, the number of people that would use the product, how many days a week people would use the product, essentially. Right. And we had lots of, we sort of steadily over time watched that number go up. And so that was one of the things that kind of we kept a close eye on. And that's your DAU MAU, daily active user to monthly active user ratio. And then the other thing that we were paying really close attention to was retention. So if someone started 3 months ago, 3 months later, are they still using the product?
Were there any moments during that phase where you weren't live yet, you didn't have a website, where customers churned or early users churned or gave you feedback that you didn't agree with? Or what's that process like? I can imagine it can be very difficult deciding a product roadmap where you've only got a limited number of customers.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the early customers had a tough time in the product, because you're essentially giving them, you're saying, you're trying to replace mature products with one that's really not. And so there's a few things you can do there. One is you can make the bits that you do well so much better than what incumbents do that people don't mind.
Yeah.
And we really did focus on that as we built out the base of the product. And so that was, that's the one of the things you do. The other thing that we did is we just were very hands-on in helping people work around the shortcomings.
Yeah.
So if there was something that was like, we love the product for this, but there's this really basic thing that we've just got to be able to do, we would be very proactive in actually making that happen through our API, through Zapier, whatever it was. That kind of early hands-on work with customers was really important. The second thing is about, how do these early conversations affect your roadmap? And here again, I think we took a really a slightly different approach, which is that we had a very strong idea about what we were building, and getting there required a lot of big pieces to be in place, right? So for example, I'll give you a really good example of this. What we didn't want to build was, we didn't want to build a box of features. And CRMs can easily become that. They can become this, this sort of checklist of 2,000 features that are kind of badly built but tick a box, right? And lots of CRMs do end up becoming this. What we wanted to build was a system, a platform, something that was, where you had these building blocks that you could connect together to make things work. And they were super high quality building blocks. And so a lot of the time people give you feedback, which is, I want to get a Slack notification when a deal closes. Let's just say, okay? And you would say, so that our team can celebrate, blah, blah, blah. And you'd say, well, the easiest thing for us to do is just to build that feature. Add a checkbox, send Slack notification when deal closes, ticket is a setting.
Yep.
The problem is that someone else will then say, I want a Slack notification when this happens. I want, and it becomes, you end up with thousands of these things, super complicated UI, spaghetti code, blah, blah, blah. So what we wanted to do instead was, we were like, well, we've got all of these features, this feedback about notifications, we've got all this feedback, whatever. And we kind of, intuitively knew that the right thing to do was for us to build a super powerful workflow engine. So that if you wanted to have that notification, that's great. If you wanted to have a completely different one, you could also do that. But if you wanted now with this toolkit, you can build all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
When a lead comes in, go and do some research on it, et cetera. And so we really tried very early on to think in these big systems. And again, that means that, customers like, how can it take so long for you to build a Slack notification? But then when you finally, deliver it, it's like, well, you can build a Slack notification, but you can also automate hundreds, thousands of processes.
Right. Are you seeing benefits from that now, years
massively,
later as well?
Massively, yeah. No, totally. So these kind of, these systems, when you build on top of them, they just compound and compound. And now, that workflow tool has run tens of millions of automations. I mean, just a huge, huge volume.
Yeah.
I mean, more than that.
That's incredible. That's super interesting. That there's got to be some push or pull though in the early days. Like, what do you build? And if you've got angry customers, like, how do you go about communicating that to early users? Like, hey, this is coming. What's that sort of feedback like? Yeah,
and that's honestly why we didn't launch for a while, and why we didn't charge people for a while, is that we wanted to have that space and freedom to take these big bets.
Yeah.
We wanted that space and that freedom to take big bets. So, as soon as you do have paying customers, there is a certain contract an agreement you're getting into with the customer, which is
right.
That they expect a certain level of service, etc. And that's the kind of freedom that you get when you're in beta, is that people are sort of understand that things are in flux. They're going to change. It's not quite ready, etc.
Right.
And that's quite a nice space to be in as you're building product.
Right. What made you say we're finally ready to move out of this sort of safe space where people really like it, but we can still screw up here and there to go and launch?
Well, I mean, it's a balance, because obviously the ultimate goal of the company is to serve customers, to make money and to grow. And so you have to, at some point, you've got to switch into that mode. And it was a constant conversation for us. It was a combination of like seeing these metrics that we thought were the right signs. It was also, customer pull. So you get to the point where you're not having to go and ask people to use the product, but you now have people who are saying like, hey, I spoke to this person, they use your product.
Right.
Could we also use it? And when that volume becomes more than like a couple of emails a week, and you're like, oh wow, now people on Twitter are sending us messages, and we put out a wait list, which is helpful for some reasons, not helpful for others. But we put out this wait list, and it hit something like 10,000 companies or something, some big number, and all of these things kind of happened at the same time, where you've got more people trying to get into the product. The customers who are using it are showing really good signs. And we felt that we just hit that point where also, at some point the team are, need to change modes as well.
Right.
And so, it felt like for all of those reasons that we just sort of tipped over. And then we set a date, which was, a couple of months out, and we're like, this is it, we're going GA. Anything that you think we need to do before then, it's got to happen now. And then we launched in sort of Q2, end of Q1, beginning of Q2 in 23.
Yeah. You talked about the waitlist. What you said there were some things that weren't beneficial from the waitlist. I'm curious. You've got 10,000 companies. Yeah. What's the thesis behind the benefits and the cons of that list?
Well, so the advantage is it's interesting to see if our message is resonating. So when you put up a website and you start talking about your product publicly on Twitter or wherever, it's good to see if that message lands. So are people interested in what we're building? And it's a good validation of that. It's a good validation of the way you talk about it, etc. The problem is that people so there's two types of people that will sign up for the wait list. People who don't have intent to use a CRM, but are just curious about what's being built and want to see it. And so that's, kind of from a business perspective, not super useful, but they're on your wait list.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is someone who wants a CRM, but they probably want it now. And so if they go onto your wait list and 9 months later you say, oh, now you can use it, they're probably using another product already.
Right.
And so I think the kind of the like half-life of a sign up on a wait list is probably measured more in kind of like days than months. But inevitably most people have been there for months.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to them, the actual value of that is not massive. But it's helpful for the other reasons.
Yeah. Were you able to leverage that wait list or existing customers in any interesting ways on that day of launch? Because I imagine that's pretty hectic. You've been working at this for years. There's a lot on the line. You've got a little bit of pressure if no one likes it. Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah. So on the launch day, we launched on Product Hunt, and we did a big Twitter thing. And on LinkedIn, etc. I mean, I think the important thing is when you do those launches is to line everything up as much as possible beforehand. So what we would do is we would, angel investors, employees, kind of friends of Attio, etc. People that you've met for whatever. We would give them a few days warning. Make it super easy for them to talk about the company, send them blurbs about the message you're trying to get across, and just make it very easy for them to engage with the launch. And that is really effective. We do that still when we have announcements coming out to all of our investors, all of the people who are like really close to the company. We'll just really make it easy for them to engage. And then obviously if you build a good product, then that will happen organically as well. And that's something that we, are pretty obsessed about, is building a good product. So hopefully that sort of the result of that then becomes this kind of social
Right.
buzz, and
That automatically sort of, to your earlier point where people start referencing or referring other customers before you guys have even gone live. Like that's a pretty good signal you've got a great product.
yeah, and it's all of the kind of things that we were just very, very focused on earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything surprising that that happened that day or leading up to it after the launch that you expected to happen that didn't, or the other way around?
I think the most surprising thing is just how generous people were with their time when the product was really, really bad. And so it's surprising, and a lot of these people are, now really good friends and I've got a really good relationship with now. But when we first started building the product, and it's actually just very surprising how willing people were to test it, give really great feedback, etc.
Yeah.
And some of them are exceedingly patient, because Attio is in relative to other CRMs and lots of other products actually can ingest a lot of data. And so we have customers with millions and millions of records. And one of the things that we do is we generate the vast majority of that data automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to go and create contacts.
Yep.
That will all happen. It will ambiently be connected to your calendar, your email, in a segment, whatever data source is your data warehouse, and your CRM gets built automatically for you. Yeah. And initially, when we first rolled this out, we'd done it with our own data sources, which as sort of pre-launch startup was like not a huge number of emails, and we were maybe sending like 3 emails a day or something. So it's like very, very low volume. Yeah. But we thought it was a lot. We maybe had like tens of thousands of emails.
Right.
So we were like connecting, it was working, it wasn't as fast as we wanted it to, but it got there eventually, and we were going to fix it and blah, blah, blah. When the first person that we sort of onboarded, that was someone that we didn't know. So it was like a big moment, right? And this was a sort of a well-known investor in Silicon Valley who'd reached out on Twitter and said like, hey, really interested, I want to check out your product. They connected their email and they had something like 700,000 emails or something. And it took us, when we sort of found out that they had 700,000 emails, we're like, okay, this is uncharted territory for us. Let's see what happens.
Is this going to work?
3 days later, we literally not left the office, and we're still trying to get this guy's email inbox to sync. So we've come a long way since then. So now, so that was like 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now that same inbox would take minutes to sync, but the delta is just ginormous.
It's huge. That's incredible. You mentioned investors, and for the launch, reaching out to investors to support you as well. You were an investor.
Yeah.
I'm super curious. Your firm invested in a company. This was before you were a founder, and I'm curious what that did to you, seeing those founders come in to the office every day when you're still an investor.
Yeah. So we invested in lots of really great companies mostly in Europe. Mm-hmm. And one of the companies that we invested in was a company called Monzo, mm-hmm. which is, we all, at the time it was called Mondo, and we all know now, Monzo is a super successful, brilliant company. And they started in our office. So in our office, we had a co-working space. Mm-hmm. And there was about 8 of them. They were sitting on a desk next to our desk. And every day you'd watch people come in to build this company and sort of see the progress. Started off with like everyone arriving, unboxing their laptops, etc. And then, by the time they left our office, there were prototypes of the cards arriving, and they were kind of handing them out. And we would go to the ATM on the corner and like withdraw money, get the notification, and it's sort of amazing to see it all to come together. Yeah. And it made me kind of realize that, a combination of watching these companies get built, talking to all the people building them, and also the fact that I was basically spending nights and weekends writing code, was a pretty strong signal to me that I would be happier building product and building a company than being an investor.
Yeah. I'll ask. Oh, wait a second. You've got this epiphany.
Mm.
Now what? That's like, it's a pretty big realization that you want to build something, and then, what do you do? Who do you do
Yeah.
it with? In what industry?
Yeah. So then what happens is, at the time I had been building an internal tool for the fund, which essentially was a way for us to keep track of our conversations with people.
Right.
We used to have this thing where someone would email and you would essentially ask around the office, have we ever spoken to this founder? Do we know anything about this company?
Yeah.
And maybe someone would respond, half the time people weren't in the office, so you would never know. But then we would end up, you'd end up, oh, I'm just going to, I'm going to speak to them. You'd speak to them and then you'd talk to a partner 3 days later and they're like, oh yeah, I spoke to them last month. Nah, forget it. We're not doing that or whatever. Right. And so I built a system which essentially was a way for us to track the people and companies we'd spoken to and be a bit more organized about it. And so when I was thinking about leaving investing, I had that as an idea of something I could do. And I had there were lots of random things, but I had nothing concrete.
Yeah.
So I kind of left with nothing.
Yeah.
And so I had this sort of idea in the back of my head that there was this thing that I built there that could be useful, but really I didn't have high conviction about it. And I left and I was quite excited, and then suddenly very not, very worried. Because then I was like, I've left a really good job that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I've got no idea what I'm going to do. And so I probably spent a good, 3 months, talking to people. I mean, even saying what you say, talking, it makes it sound like, more structured. It's very unstructured.
Right.
Just really like trying to work out what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And then, through that process, I basically realized that no, the perfect idea wasn't just going to land, at my feet.
Yeah.
I just had to start something. And so I started building, I'm sort of professionalizing and building as a product what I built at the fund. And that turned into FundStack. And because that was very tailored to a specific industry, we got traction quite fast. And within 3 months, we had revenue, we'd hired a couple of engineers, et cetera. And we managed to get that business quite far, relatively quickly. And then we just hit a complete wall. So like 18 months in, it was just like, there was just nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And essentially the realization was that we were working extraordinarily hard, just, as hard as you could work. We were, in the office till 1, 2 a.m. There's nothing else I was doing except for working on this company. And we basically realized that we were building something that had a very limited upside. We're building for like a very small industry where we just didn't feel like the amount of work we were putting in warranted what could be done.
Right.
The amount of work we were doing wasn't warranted given what the outcome could be.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of the beginning of Attio, essentially.
Yeah, because you hit this wall, and then you go for a coffee with your co-founder. What was that conversation like? Where I imagine admitting that you've even hit that wall was probably tough.
Yeah. So that's summer of 2000. It's the end of the summer of 2019, and so we are sitting in our office, and there's about 6 or 7 of us in the office, and Alex and I haven't explicitly spoken about this, but we both have this feeling that we are building something that we just didn't think was had this exciting future. And so it was unsaid, but it was so palpable that I just had this I was like, we just have to talk about this.
Yeah.
So we left the office because we're in this very small office. Everyone is there. So we left the office. We went across the street to a cafe, and I said to him, like, this is not going anywhere. We're going to work for the next 10, 15 years, and this is not going to be a good business.
Right.
And he was like, And there's just this massive sense of it's the relief on his face. He's like, "I'm so glad you said that. I'm so relieved. I've been feeling exactly the same."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, okay, well, we're wasting our time then.
Yeah.
Like what are we doing here?" And then he's like, "You're right, but it's also really fun to build stuff. We enjoyed working together.
Yeah.
We enjoy, it's like the technical aspects and the product aspects were really fun." And so we agreed that we would sit for the next couple of hours and sort of sketch out what product we would build together.
Right.
If we were, if we could start from scratch. We were really interested in the CRM space because we'd built a vertical CRM. We knew a lot about it.
Yeah.
We knew all of the problems. We knew, we've been trying to get this product out of venture capital into startups, etc. So we'd spoken to a ton of people about CRM. And so we're pretty excited about what we could do there. We were we had a lot of thoughts about technically how it would work, etc. And so we sketched out this product. And once we'd laid it all out, I can literally remember saying these words to Alex. I said to him, I was like, "Wouldn't it be super annoying if we saw a YC company do this?" And he was like, "Dude, that would just drive me insane. That would be so annoying." It's like, "Well, let's not let that happen.
Yeah.
Let's build it." And so we then had this. Alex then said to me, "But I think we're missing something here. Salesforce, and these incumbent products can't be as bad as people say they are. Just can't be true."
Right.
And so we went back to the office and we tried to set it up. And in like 30 minutes, Alex was like, "Okay, we're doing it." I'm in, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so that was on a Friday or on a Thursday, Friday. And we said to everyone, like, "Right, it's the weekend, a long weekend. Come back on Monday and we're starting again."
What was that process like? Did you need to convince anyone on the team as well? It was like, "Hey, this is the right, change in direction," or was that a tough conversation at all, or was it just like, "Hey,
No, I think you realize actually when it's something that as a new founder you're very nervous about other people having bad news or feeling the stress of the company, etc. And you do this thing, you sort of like move heaven and earth to shield people
right.
from these things. The truth is that you can't, and you don't need to.
Right.
And actually, we were super worried. We were really worried, like, what are they going to think? They think they've been working on this for so long, and suddenly we're switching, and how are we going to sell this to them?
Right.
But actually, it was basically a non-event. I mean, we said to everyone, "We are starting again. We're building this."
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was super bought in. And they, the reaction was essentially like, "Great, we feel and see the same things."
Right.
And so everyone actually, I don't think we lost anyone through the pivot.
That's incredible. Is there a difference now looking back at Funstack and recruiting those early folks and bringing people on board with Attio now, where you've got such a stronger vision and a much more ambitious vision as well? Yeah. Does that change how you attract people, or how you what are the biggest differences between that level of ambition at the company? Like, does that have effects on culture, on hiring, or?
Yeah, it's actually it's kind of hard for me to answer that question because there's so many variables that have changed. Yeah, I mean, one is the level of ambition, but what's also changed is the amount of progress we've made, the amount of capital we have,
right?
How good we are at running the company. So there's so many different variables that have shifted over that time. But I think just in general, I think when we first started, we had a few $100,000 in kind of angel or pre-seed or whatever you want to call it. We didn't have this super big vision, because we were building a vertical CRM. Mm-hmm. We had no track record or anything like that. And so at that point, you're not going to hire people who have like a ton of options, right? If someone can go to a company with more money, a bigger vision, etc., a more proven management team, leadership team, it's kind of sensible that they do that, right? And so what you're really doing is you're trying to find people that are essentially, what we now categorize into two categories. So One is a profile that we call a hidden gem, and the other one is a rising star. So you're essentially sacrificing experience in kind of like big good companies, or sort of high profile experience. You're sacrificing that, and you're totally indexing on kind of drive, ambition, and capacity.
Yeah.
And so you have to. It's harder to find those things. You can't just do a kind of LinkedIn Boolean search, big company, X experience, these skills. Oh, look at the superstar. We'll just hire them, whatever it costs, kind of thing. You got to speak to a lot of people. You have to build a system that finds these hidden gems. And I think that in the earliest employees of the company were all those people. Some of them have now become totally instrumental. Today they run big parts of our org, and they are the kind of like foundation of the company.
Yeah.
And now they would be very obvious hires because they have got tons of experience.
Yeah.
They've done incredible things. But back then they far less so.
What do you screen for in those early days? Because I can imagine you're trying to build this product, you want to get progress. You probably could use some help in, getting the product built or marketing it. How do you not sacrifice, a B- hire, or like, how do you actually screen for the right person, those hidden gems at that stage?
Yeah. So, now the way that we do it is very thoughtful and organized, and has like, pretty high success rate. So we've iterated on this process a ton, and we can talk about where we are today.
Yeah.
But back then, really the person that's doing all of the interviewing for almost every role is the founders. And the interview process at the beginning is far less structured. The roles that you're hiring for are you're 1 second you're like, oh, we need someone who's like vaguely able to do marketing. Then the next second you're like, well, we have a big, we don't have an accountant or anyone doing ops, so let's have someone who's kind of, that shaped.
Right.
And so you have all these different profiles you're trying to hire for. Mostly you're just trying to hire for like kind of smart generalists. And the way that we would do that mostly is just by talking to people a lot. So we would just try and spend a few hours with them, talking about all of our problems, how they would solve it, and trying to kind of dig into the problems and listen to the solutions that they present.
Yeah.
And that was essentially, the early hiring strategy. Now that doesn't scale because it requires hours and hours of time, and that's once you've got the candidate. So there's all the screening bit before, and like in the early days we were spending at least 40-50% of our time on this. Yeah, sometimes honestly, there was a period when we were trying to hire 2 engineers, and we were paying very low salaries, really difficult, and that was taking up 30 hours a week.
Jeez. Just for those 2 hires.
Yeah, totally. I mean, early engineering hiring is really, really tough for us because we don't have a profile.
Right.
You're just really trying to find, and you're trying to find someone who is, we had very high technical bar because both Alex and I are technical.
Yeah.
We have really sort of, we're sort of really passionate about how the product's built. So we had this very high technical bar, but we didn't have the brand, the kind of the gravitas to attract obvious talent.
Yeah.
And again, this shifts as you get further along.
Yeah.
But in the early days, it was really difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. And let's talk about that shift a little bit. I'm curious because you launched Attio, or you started Attio in 2019.
Yeah.
And then you basically spent 2 years heads down building the product until you raised your seed round.
Yeah.
A 7.7 million seed round.
Yeah.
I want to get into the story of how you raised that round, but also to your earlier point of how that changes over time. If there are any big changes after that, first big funding milestone. But yeah, curious to hear how you went about closing that round.
We get a Twitter DM from a well-known Silicon Valley fund, And the Twitter DM basically says, hey, really interested in what you guys are doing. Can I have a demo? It's like, wow, this is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So reply back, yes, absolutely, would love to do a demo. Get on, quite nervous, get on to do this demo with this investor. And we say, look, we haven't launched yet. This is where we've got to. This is the vision, blah, blah, blah. And the investor at the end says, you guys are ready to launch. This is like, this is already useful. You should launch. And can I get you, can I get you to speak to a few of my colleagues tomorrow? And we were like, yes. And he's like, okay, look, let's have another call in a few hours. I'm going to brief you. I want to talk to you about some more things. So we go through that. We had this very intense couple of days. It's like 4 calls in 2 days, and it culminates in this final call with a couple of colleagues. And we get onto this call, and there's like 11 people on the call. And they're all it's kind of like, it's almost like a meme. One of them is like is sort of at a holiday house. The other one is at the on the car on the way to the workout or something. But there's these 11 people, some camera off, some on mute, etc. And we pitch the company, and it's late for us because we're in London, they're in San Francisco, and so we pitch the company, me and Alex, and we get off the call. And it's like 8 p.m. or something. We're like, I don't know. I have no idea if that went well. And we go to bed. I wake up the next morning, early, like 6:30. And the first thing I do is I check my phone. And usually go back to bed after that. But I get on my phone, check my phone, and there is a term sheet. And so we have this term sheet, and the term sheet says, we want to invest whatever it was, 6 million in Attio at this valuation, etc. And I kind of stopped reading at that point. I was like, we've got a term sheet, right? Just like everything else is just like, who cares?
Doesn't matter.
I forwarded to Alex, and I'm like, dude, we got a term sheet from a Silicon Valley fund. This is insane. Yeah. And he's like, oh my God, okay, let's go, let's meet up, like blah, blah, blah. So this was in COVID. So he came around to my house. Mm-hmm. And we then read the term sheet, and the term sheet basically says you've got 3 days to decide, and in 90 days of signing the term sheet, you and all of the founding team who are going to be with the company have to be in the US, and it has to be a US incorporated company.
Wow! Within 3 days, you need
within 3 days, and so that for us it was like was an incredible impetus then to basically like get this round done. Yeah. So then all of the people we were having conversations with, we were like, we've got a term sheet, we've got this 3-day clause. Yep. Like this is it, And I think the lesson there is like urgency is really important. Mm-hmm. Creating a bit of like competitive tension is really important in fundraising. And it worked really well for us because everyone kicked into gear, and then within the next couple of days we had 3 or 4 term sheets. Right. We ended up not going with that fund for lots of reasons, but it was like a very important mechanism that you need for closing these things.
Like a forcing function.
You need a forcing function, like a sense that there is a limited amount of time to make a decision, because otherwise otherwise there's just like the sort of rational thing is to wait and see. Right.
Less risk.
And if you think like there's nothing, well, we can just wait and we could get it then. So you have to, people have to believe that there is an opportunity, a window, but it won't be there forever.
Yeah. What early signs when you were talking to other investors or deciding who to take on board, what sort of signals did you get where you were reassured that, it was the right decision?
So, I think one is in both cases, we spent a lot of time in a short period of time, but we spent a lot of very intense time with them during the fundraising process. So what this looks like for Redpoint, this is a cool story. 6 months after our seed round, I get, as soon as you've raised money, thousands of associates all over the world just send out a sort of like copy and paste email. Love what you're doing to disrupt the CRM space. Would love to chat, right? And you just get a lot of these. And, through necessity, you have to ignore. You basically, you can't respond to them because it would just take up all of your time. And and the reality is that there's like very low intent.
Right.
They're just sort of trying to do their job, and so you mostly just ignore them. And so we'd got these emails from Redpoint and not just not engage with them. But then one of our Christoph, who's one of the partners at Point Nine, sent me an email saying, "Hey, Redpoint are trying to reach out to you." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. Should I speak to them?" And he said, "Yeah, actually, Alex Bard at Redpoint, he's pretty damn good, and he really knows the CRM space. And I think Christoph was involved in Zendesk, and Zendesk was a competitor of Alex's company, and blah blah." He's like, "This guy's good. You should speak to him."
Yeah.
So I did speak to them, and I got on a video call with Alex and Pat, who is also at Redpoint, and we chatted. We booked like 45 minutes. We ended up chatting for an hour and a half, and it's a great conversation. I left the call, and it was the first time that I would tell people that we're building a CRM. So obviously, Point Nine had bought into this, but we'd never really had. This was like one of the very first times that someone who had the level of experience in CRM that Alex has, didn't recoil at the idea that we were trying to. Most people were like, "That's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Don't build a CRM."
Yeah.
And so Alex was when we said, "No, we're really trying to build a CRM."
Yeah.
He was one of the first people that understood the industry and then had their eyes light up. I was like, "This is great." And so we then had a call the next day. And at the end of the call, he said, it was a Tuesday or something. And he said, "Hey, how do you feel about me being in London on Thursday?" and
Casual.
I was like, "Well, let me let you know in like 30 minutes." So I spoke to Alex, my co-founder. I was like, should we do this? And he's like, "Yeah, there's no risk, just get him to come." And so he came, and he arrived in our office at 11 a.m. on a Thursday, and we ended up leaving a restaurant that evening at 1:30 a.m. or something. So we spent this like super intense 13, 14 hours together. And that's, you get a lot of signal. And I left that day thinking that I got on really well with this guy, and that we would work together super well.
Yeah. Which has been the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you go about choosing the right partner at that time? I mean, it's also interesting. You were an investor. Like, how did that help in that process? And what was that decision making like? Did you just purely go for best valuation? The right partners? Like, what is that?
So we ended up we went with Ricardo at Point Nine, and there were a few reasons that we chose to work with Ricardo. Number one is that I felt that he understood the business the best. And I think the kind of the fear that you have as a founder is that someone invests in a company thinking that they're investing in something different to what you're building.
Right.
And if that happens, it's just, it's going to, it's going to create friction if they join your board and they have a different idea of what you're trying to do, what challenges you face, how you're going to do it, etc. Yeah. So you kind of want there to be alignment around that. And my sense was that he understood what we were doing the best out of everyone we spoke to, and there would be the least alignment necessary post closing.
Right.
That was number one. Number two, they were a kind of they're seed focused B2B fund, which again, when we looked at their portfolio composition, etc., it just made the most sense.
Yeah.
And then I also got on super well with him. And again, this is a relationship that's going to be like 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And so that was, that's pretty damn important.
Yeah. Were there any, in the subsequent rounds, did you use the lessons from this round, like creating urgency, or, did you just work with the same partners again? Like how do you decide when isn't the right time to raise more funding? Because since then you've raised two more rounds.
Yeah. I think that you want to raise money when you don't have to, if possible. So that's not always possible. But if possible, you want to be raising money when there's not a absolute necessity, because again, it's just about about leverage. You need to be able to walk away from deals, right?
Right.
And you really need to be able to do that.
So that you don't have to move continents.
Yeah, or the thing is, if in all these situations, you want to have, you want to have some leverage to be able to get to shape things, in the company's interest, in your interest, etc. And so you don't want to fundraise when your back is against the wall, because then you really do, time is against you.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always tried to raise when we haven't had a complete impetus to do so, and it hasn't been an absolute requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And also you want to do it ideally with some foresight, so that you can be in the right posture as a company. The fundraising is a really intense activity that takes up a ton of time from loads of people in the org. And you'd think it's something that the founder just goes and does. That's not the reality. The reality is that you have to put together a data room, and putting together a data room means that you need really good product data, you need really good finance data, you need really good FP&A data.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have, then there's going to be a ton of DD and all of that stuff. So HR, HR, like real or imagined, whatever, like you have to have all of your kind of employment contracts, all of those things. And so the amount of effort that goes into it is just ginormous. And if you're not prepared for that, then it's going to be, it won't go well.
It'll be a bloodbath.
Yeah. So you've got to, you want to be in the right posture. You want to know, right, in 3 months, we're going to go and fundraise, and let's get things in good shape. I think setting a very specific time frame for that to happen is important, so that you don't end up having conversations that go on for months and months. I think you really want to sort of not have conversations, or at least not serious fundraising conversations, and try and then have them all together in a defined space of time.
Right.
And then there are, occasionally things happen which are opportunistic. And again, so for example, with our Series A, that was very opportunistic. We weren't fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just an opportunity where we got introduced to investors that we really, really liked. We felt that they really understood what we were doing. We thought they would be massively additive. And so this is Redpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And the offer that they gave us was really good. And so there was just, it just opportunistically, it felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been able to leverage those? How have you been able to leverage those funding rounds for, hiring or getting more customers, or, you've got the money.
Yeah.
How do you then go about actually using it and deploying it in the right way, or using that moment as momentum instead of just like, okay, check this box, we're done, we can relax?
Yeah. What a funding round does is it's an easily visible external validation that the company has made some progress. And so, I think it's, I don't think I don't know how much it actually matters to the outside world, but it certainly helps. And it certainly helps when you're hiring, because it gives people a third-party validation in the business.
Right.
X fund thinks that this is a good business, basically. Right. And that is helpful in their decision-making. It gives people a sense that there is, and there's definitely truth in this, that the company is more likely to be around. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be a customer, then, there's going to be, there's every round that you get through, the likelihood that the company will continue to exist goes up quite substantially.
Right.
If you look at the difference between a seed and a Series A startup, it's very dangerous. Series A and B to B is kind of like, again, less dangerous, but there's danger. Once you start getting beyond that, then you can be quite confident the company won't disappear overnight.
Yeah.
And so again, just as a validation to or as a signal to customers. That's important.
We're going to be around. We're actually going to be able to build the product you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that also then change how you're hiring? I know I want to talk a little bit about the graduate program you guys have. I think that's super interesting. Do those funding rounds play any role in who you hire or how you hire?
I mean, not really. I mean, there's like the funding rounds specifically don't. The scale of the company does, right? So whether that's through a funding round, through revenue growth, through customer growth, whatever, as the company matures, certainly. Now, obviously, there's like a correlation between the funding rounds and the growth,
right?
But it's not specifically because the round happened,
right?
I mean, you do make adjustments where, when you're thinking about how quickly you can deploy capital, et cetera, then of course that plays into it. But I think the biggest thing is just is as the company scales, you need different types of people. And the people that you look for at 10 people are going to be quite different to the ones you look for 100 people.
Right. And you've got a very interesting program that sort of systematizes finding those hidden gems and growing them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we spoke earlier about this, the idea that when we started, building a company, we had one type of person, which was a hidden gem, a rising star, which was this, someone who was kind of inexperienced but highly capable. And years later, when we look at the composition of the company, and there's this sort of interesting exercise you can do, which is like, instead of building an org chart, you build a kind of influence chart.
Okay.
So an org chart will have everyone, leader, manager, blah, blah, blah. But who is actually the most influential person? Who are the most influential people in the company? And you'll find that actually it's not super correlated with the org chart. There's like, there's this staff engineer who's got no direct reports, but it's like, it's just an absolute so pivotal to what we do. And our Ned and Luke and Gio, our staff engineers, have been at the company for a really long time. They were these people. And so, and then there's, again, the person who leads marketing for us, Alex, again, started as a graduate in the company, and is now leading, a big team and doing a really great job. And so when we looked around at our company and the people who were really instrumental, we found that so many of them were kind of forged at Attio, and were so worth investing in. And so we wanted to replicate this essentially. And so what we did is we, counter to, I think, this kind of prevailing winds, is we decided that actually graduates and inexperienced talent was going to be a really, really big part of our story. And so we started a graduate program. The first two people that went through that graduate program, Alice and Heather, are now kind of, super important parts of the org. Have been absolutely incredible. Yeah. And when we saw the success of that, it kind of gave us even more confidence that we should do this. So we're now about to start our third cohort. Okay. Which is really exciting.
And what do these cohorts look like? So you've got, I'm guessing you do this yearly or and then what's sort of the criteria for picking someone, and then how does the cohort work? I know most companies just have managers working with interns or with graduates. How do you guys look at pulling these people into the org?
So we have someone who runs the program. Shreya runs it for us, and she essentially will do this sort of weekly. We'll do a weekly session with all the grads, and try and give context on all the things that are happening, make sure that they're all doing well, etc. It's quite a structured program now. Each grad will then get a sponsor, and the sponsor will be someone someone experienced, brilliant, senior in a different org. So it might be someone from finance, might be someone from marketing, etc. And then they will do some level of rotation through those things. Within about 6 months, you kind of know where people are going to be really impactful. Right. And then they'll zone in on that.
Right. And so then you just pull people into that. Yeah. So you don't bring people in with a function in mind. You're just purely on talent, you'll bring people in and sort of exposing them to all of these different
So
departments?
so we will bring people in with a sort of a range of functions.
Okay.
So it might be you're going to get a bit of exposure to marketing, finance, operations, and talent, and people will then quite quickly gravitate towards one of those things.
Yeah.
And now obviously that's like partly based on what they're good at. It's sort of this thing where it's like, well, what do you want to do? What are you good at? What does a company need?
Right.
And if the sort of intersection of those three circles is ideally where they would be, like, they're good at it, they want to do it,
Yeah.
and the company needs it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think in general, you guys have some really interesting hiring philosophies and principles. You've talked about not hiring software engineers specifically.
Yeah.
Can you explain why that's so important, or what the impacts of that is?
Yeah. So we hire product engineers. I think it's a relatively I think it's something that a lot of companies have come around to now.
Mhm.
When we started doing it, it wasn't that common. So our thinking is that we want to build a brilliant product.
Mhm.
And the product is essentially the service that we offer to our customers, and it's the most important thing that we do. And for us to do that, you need a certain type of engineer who deeply cares about the end result and isn't interested in just solving technical problems, but is interested in delivering a brilliant product.
Right.
And a technical solution is part of doing that, but it's not the only thing.
Right.
That's really important. This is so back then, this was like 4 years ago, generative AI wasn't a massive part of engineering, or it wasn't a part at all.
Mhm.
And obviously that's changed dramatically. And I think now the idea of a product engineer is even sort of more valid, because so much of what you do as an engineer now is like deeply thinking about the problem you're trying to solve for a customer, how it's going to be architected, etc. And the actual the skill of sort of writing a function is still important.
Right.
And you still need people who really understand that. But the how you build a system and how these things interplay is more important now.
Yeah.
It also changes the way that you build the rest of the EPD, engineering product design org around it.
How?
So what's nice about it is that it gives you the flexibility, because our engineers are very product oriented.
Mhm.
It gives us the flexibility to not have everything be PM led. Now we have PMs at Attio, and they're very, very important, but our ratio of PMs to engineers is lower than it would otherwise be. So we have we have a PM for about every 10 engineers. And we can do that because a lot of the sort of traditional PM work can be offloaded to an engineer.
Right.
And so we don't need PMs to be like super into the kind of like, ticket level detail of how a menu should open or something like that. That's something that our engineers are passionate about and really good at doing.
Yeah. Do you think that the culmination of all of this, the way you're building the org, hiring product engineers, Attio is a very interesting product in that, if anyone hasn't tried it out, like you'll see the magic moment when you sign up, and it does a lot of the work for you by pre-populating the database.
Yeah.
What do you think of, like, is that the future of software? And does that correlate as well with having these more product engineers as opposed to software engineers, where software is moving into the world where it's doing things for you as opposed to just looking pretty and being somewhat helpful?
Yeah, and also I think what we think is exciting is that software is becoming so much more malleable, because the ability to generative AI has allowed, sort of, if you were excited about no code and the idea of software that could be manipulated through a UI and complicated config, etc. This is the real no code moment, where it's not just substituting like code with very complex UI, you're substituting code with words. And so software malleability and configuration is going to completely change. And that's to say nothing about, sort of automation agents, decision making, etc. This is just purely talking about how the products work. And so because of that, I think that the problems that engineers are solving now are much more around building systems that are good places for this generated configuration, for these workflows to live on top of, and you have to be a really, really good kind of holistic system thinker now.
How do you screen for that? That sounds easier said than done.
Yeah. So the way we have we've iterated our engineering interview process a lot over the years. But how it works now is that there are essentially a couple of screening calls, and the screening calls are really just to make sure that we feel like someone is aligned with our engineering philosophy, that they will, that we have a sense that they'll do well at Attio, that they're technically at the right bar. We then go into a sort of two-part technical screening. So it really depends specifically on the role. But what it will look like roughly is, first bit will be a code review challenge, and I think this is kind of unique. So we will send someone a GitHub repo with a pull request, and we'll get them to review the code. Now, this is important because code review is becoming very important. Especially as Gen AI takes over a lot of the code generation, code review becomes really important. It's important because it really tells you about, whether someone is good at giving feedback, which again, and whether they can, constructively kind of tell someone something's not bad and whatever, if something is bad. And so we think that's really an important skill. And then the other thing with the code review challenge is really interesting is that you can essentially put some things in there which are really easy to find, some things which are like medium hard to find, and some things which are really nuanced and difficult to find. And it's a really good way of you basically understanding how experienced you can level someone.
Right.
Because someone who's really brilliant will see a kind of an edge case, some like complicated race condition that might happen in certain scenarios that would, go over lots of people's heads. So it's a really good way to do leveling. The next stage is will be a pretty hands-on exercise to architect/build something. So a time box thing. Here's a few hours to essentially solve this problem with us. And it will be a kind of collaborative experience, working out how someone thinks, etc. And we found that those in combination with a final stage screen with me, which I still interview everyone in the company, are pretty good indicators for us.
What is the thing you're looking for in all of those steps? That's what are the traits and characteristics that you're looking for, apart from just being able to solve those challenges and being able to,
Yeah. So this is, okay. So we've created four positive characteristics, not even characteristics, four positive profiles that we look for, and four anti-patterns or sort of red flags. So we're trying to basically decide, is someone just like a clear outperformer, right? They're just one of those people that is just brilliant. They've just done everything right, So for example, if you were looking at my LinkedIn, I would not be one of these people. But as someone who went to like an absolutely top university, did super well, they were on the sports team, their first job, they just got they completely crushed it, got promoted at every opportunity, just really, obvious people. And again, it's a small startup, very difficult to hire these people. But those people do exist. The second criteria is the hidden gem. And then the third is the rising star, which we've spoken about. And then we have another one, which is a kind of wild card. And internally, we call these 1 or 4s because that's our performance scale. 1 is bad, 4 is good. And so there are certain people that you just can't put into, you just don't know, right? And occasionally you take a bet on someone and you're like, they're either going to just like completely change the company or they're going to be disaster.
Yeah.
We don't hire these people often, but sometimes it's worth taking a bet.
Yeah.
And so those are the sort of 4 criteria of people that we hire.
Yeah.
And then there are lots of things to watch out for. So, you know, there are these profiles that, you know, one is a 9-to-5er, and that's self-explanatory. The second is what we call a wanderer.
Mm-hmm.
People who are who don't have a clear goal, you know, ambition,
Just in
etc.
life.
Yeah, and they're sort of trying different things, lots of career breaks, lots of periods of consulting, just weaving in and out of lots of things, don't tend to stick with things for long, etc. Again, not the profile you want in a startup. Might be good somewhere else, but probably not in an early stage startup. Then we have job hoppers, and these are people who do lots of short stints, can't stick things out. We have a philosophy here that the best work that someone does at a company will basically be after about 12, 18 months. That's when they really have the context and they'll start to be really impactful. And so no good if people leave after 12 months. They're just about getting useful.
Just missing the good part.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one is kind of a difficult one because it's hard to identify this person, but it's what we call a wave rider.
Okay.
And a wave rider can look like an outperformer,
right?
Because they have been in these great companies, and they've you know, you look at their LinkedIn and it's like wow. But there is a time in every company's life when they are scaling headcount, when you know it's the hiring becomes more formulaic. It's easier to get in, and when you do get in, it's easier not to do something.
Right.
And what happens then is people join these great companies. And they're there for 18 months. And then based on the trajectory of that company, they're able to get into another high trajectory company.
Right.
But when you really dig into it, and they look like an outperformer, but when you really get into it, they're just not able to talk about their impact in those places.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that we look out for.
When those people are in, like, I imagine you hire those people, you know, by mistake at some times.
Yeah.
What's the performance process like where, you know, you're obviously growing rapidly? How do you make sure the company and specifically the new hires and people are moving in the right direction? And, you know, how do you sort of check in that, you know, it is 12 months in and they are about to actually do their best work and they're not, you know, planning on leaving or anything like that? How do you make sure everyone sort of stays on track towards the companies?
I mean, luckily we are still small enough that we know everyone in the company well. And so, you know, as an E team, we're still at the stage where we can, you know, go through every single person in the company and there will be someone in that meeting who will have a very good sense of that person's impact and, you know, and performance. What we try and do, again, and I think this is like the only thing that you really can do when you're a small company, is especially when things are moving really quickly, we try to keep the performance cycles super short. So we don't have, you know, once a year annual review, this big, you know, production,
right? Because
the company it changes too fast for that. And so what we try and do is give feedback really, really quickly. We try to create an environment where everyone feels like they can go and seek out feedback, and yeah, just kind of, you know, create a very open sort of open feedback loop. I'm sure, like, inevitably this will change as we scale, but right now it's working well for us. I mean, I think the reality is that if you are someone who is seeking a highly structured environment and wants really rigorous kind of, you know, sort of mechanisms for career progression and feedback and all of those kind of things.
Clear ladder.
Yeah, you're probably not joining a very early, fast-growing company. So the people that tend to join, you know, tend to do well in an environment where there's a bit more ambiguity.
A little bit of chaos. Yeah. When you're, you know, implementing that feedback, giving that feedback as a company and specifically also as the executive team, how do you make sure different departments, different people are moving in the right direction that the company wants to go in? How do you make sure everyone's rowing in the direction they're meant to be going in?
Yeah, this is really this is a really hot topic for us because again, it just changes as the company grows.
Mhm.
So the most important thing I think is, certainly for us right now, is that you have real alignment at the exec level, and we just spend a lot of time together talking.
Mhm.
And so we do that. We have every week, we have our E-team meeting, which is a few hours. And it follows a kind of, an agenda that we do every single week. And we will, as the group of people that run the company, we'll talk about pretty much everything. Or at least all of the things that, that are sort of a very high priority for us to talk about that week. The important thing is that the E-team run the company before they run their specific areas, right? So we're all trying to just make the company better.
Mhm.
That's all centered around, a mission that the whole company is working towards.
Mhm.
And you then from there, each area will have a strategy. Now the strategy is known to everybody else. So it's not sort of, it should be a well-known thing, what marketing strategy is, what the sales strategy is, etc. But they're going to be slightly different. They won't be the same because the time horizons that different areas work towards
Right.
are quite different. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's just say that the mission of the company is to build the best CRM for the next generation of companies. And we then have targets about, that we want to hit along the way to do that. So I'm just going to make stuff up here, but let's just say that next year we wanted to double ACVs.
Mhm.
Now, what would have to happen in each area is kind of different. So we would say, right, in product, we have a problem because the product now couldn't sustain double the ACVs. We would need X features. So we better start working on those today.
Mhm.
The sales team might say, well, we can't double ACVs today because the product isn't where it needs to be.
Right.
So we're going to sit tight for 6 months. And in 6 months' time, we're going to start hiring so that we have reps that are ready to go in a year's time, or whatever it might be. Again, customer support might say, well, actually, for us, this doesn't change anything. We think that even at double the ACV, the role of support is roughly the same. And we're going to carry on with our kind of, trigger-based hiring plan, and that's fine. And so everyone is kind of like has different jobs to do, even though the strategy is, okay, in a year's time, we're going to double ACVs. The sort of like the strategy that then percolates down into all of the different areas is slightly different. And I think that's kind of, and that's important because you want to hire people who are comfortable absorbing all of this context,
Right.
and synthesizing it into this, into a strategy, and then, below that into tactics.
Right.
And we try not to, we try to do that through context sharing rather than being hyper prescriptive about what needs to be done.
Right. Right.
Or how it should be done.
And is that, do you think that's a mistake a lot of companies make where they're super rigid on that aspect and don't allow for the judgment of everyone in the department or in the team to actually influence the strategy to get there? Or
I think it really, really depends. There are so many ways to build a company.
Yeah.
Right. And there are, and it will and this is something that I've massively learned and become comfortable with, is that it's okay. You build a company in the way that makes sense to you. And obviously there are definitely bad ideas, and you should definitely go and like get advice and listen and all those sorts of things. But there are probably multiple right answers.
Right.
And the one that's right is one that's like, sensible and makes sense, but also that's just going to work for you, your personality, and the way that you work.
Yeah.
And so I think the way that we are building Attio is in this way, and it makes sense for us. But for other companies, it might not. Other companies might want to set really clear objectives at the leadership team level and have, company-wide OKRs and be super, thoughtful and disciplined about that. That's not how we're building Attio. We're building Attio to give people a ton of context, and and then because of that, we think about different things, which is if we're sort of giving people, a lot of scope and space to make decisions and build stuff. What things do we have to do? Mm-hmm. Well, we have to give people way more context. Mm-hmm. They need to know, lots about our customers. They need to know about our vision. They need to know about our product roadmap, etc. So then what we go and work on, instead of going to build OKRs and spending time doing that, we go and build mechanisms to distribute context. And so, we focus a lot on all hands. We focus a lot on documentation and making sure that we have people have all the access to the data that they need and all those sorts of things. And so, again, no right or wrong answer. But this is it is the right answer for us.
Yeah. Do you see that as one of the most important roles of the founder or as a CEO to manage that context? Or
yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think, and one of the ways that you do that, honestly, is just spending a lot of time with people. And so I think, I try to spend a lot of time with the team, just talking to them. When we finish a board meeting, it's not a secretive thing. We will then go and discuss what happened at the board,
right?
What was said, why, people's opinions, all those sorts of things. And we'll often, in the all hands after the board meeting, we'll go through big bits of the board deck, and kind of give people so that everyone has the same information.
Yeah. Now, do you think that is what allows people to exert their own judgment and really allow the company to move fast and hit those targets?
Yeah, I mean, it's still this is, definitely, a caveat. This is a work in progress. We'll get better. But it's certainly something that's certainly the intention is that we want to get to the point where we have this kind of very shared understanding of the mission we're working towards, and a very shared sense of what feels Attio.
Right.
So I think one of our, I don't think this is particularly insightful, but one of our big beliefs is that the way that you move faster is through good judgment. I mean, a lot of making slow decisions or the wrong decisions is sort of more deadly than slow execution. You can execute on things super, super quickly. If you're going the wrong direction, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And so, one of the biggest things you can do to increase velocity is just make the right decisions faster.
Right.
And so we put a lot of emphasis on judgment. In some areas, this is really easy to assess. In design and brand, etc. It's just called taste. If someone has good taste, they can just make a decision. That one, that one, and you can do things really quickly. In other areas, it's harder, but it's still possible. And if and part of judgment, having good judgment is having this innate feeling of what feels Attio.
Right.
And you do that just through massive amount of shared time together, massive amount of context.
Yeah. This might be a bit of a ambiguous question, so take it where you will, but you spent years building the product. Again, going against conventional wisdom, what we talked about. How did you trust your own judgment at that time, or were there moments where you're you've talked about what does it mean to be Attio and to have this mission and to feel like you're part of that team? Was that always so strong at the beginning as well during those years when you were just heads down building the product as well, or has that changed over time? How you've personally reacted to that? Or
well, it's interesting because it's sort of, I think it's been there from quite early, but it in different forms. Because initially, when we first started building and designing the product, the company was so small that everyone was in every conversation pretty much. We're in a shared office. At that point, we didn't even have a call booth. So you take a call that you couldn't take it from anywhere other than your desk.
Right.
Occasionally, people would go and sit on the stairwell. If they had to really had to take a private call, you'd go and sit outside on the stairwell. But you hear everything, and so people's shared understanding of what's being built is it's kind of unavoidable because everyone has exactly the same information. And so it's I think there's less certainty, because things are changing a lot, but the uncertainty is shared. It's kind of like, well, we all quite don't know what the brand is, or we all quite don't know how we think about this.
Right.
But you're very aligned.
Right.
I think what happens as the company scales is that there is like more certainty about these things, but less alignment, because information distribution is imperfect. And so I think what we have is like a quite strong idea about all of these things, but by nature of some people have joined the company this week, some have been here for 4 years, and the information distribution isn't perfect. And so we focus much more now on, before it was, seeking out what it was, like, what is our brand? Now we know those things, but we have to get better at spreading that.
Spreading the information to everyone who comes
Yeah.
aboard. That's interesting. I'm trying to think, when in that process, like, how do you know what's actually important? Like, early on, right? Like, I'm sure there are less question marks now, but how do you actually realize what things are urgent that you need to decide on, that you need to have to be able to move forward, and what things can sort of wait until later, or you're comfortable with being ambiguous?
Well, I think actually the distinction is in, well, the important thing is that urgent and important are not always the same.
Okay.
And I think what happened to us definitely at the beginning is that we were like not confident enough about the distinction between urgent and important.
Can you talk about that difference?
Yeah. So you might have something that is urgent in the sense that this customer is asking for this thing, they're asking for it now, or there might be an employee or something. There might be something that like it has to happen now, but actually is not so important. And so there is a pressure to focus on the urgent things, and that might be like a very short-term bit of product work, or building something that isn't going to be strategically important, but there is pressure from sales to deliver
a single Slack notification.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? And so I think that we took away some of that pressure by not being public. And that was sort of a way that we dealt with it initially, which was we can focus on the important because there's not a lot of urgency.
Right.
And so we could be very focused on the important. Then you have to develop, you have to create artificial urgency towards those important things, but it won't happen. It doesn't happen naturally. Right. If you're just sitting there in a small office with no customers and whatever, the only urgency is artificial.
Yeah.
And so you have to create it.
Yeah.
But then when the company grows, there is a lot of natural urgency. A lot of people who come and say, I need this, it's super, super important.
Right.
And then you have to develop an instinct for what's important versus what's urgent.
Yeah. Is there any, one thing that sticks out to you, like, if I hadn't done this earlier, I would have been able to distill what is important and what isn't important much, much quicker, or?
I think it just comes down to that real clarity about what you're trying to do. I think that's I think once you have that sort of those things really deeply baked in, then it becomes much easier. A lot of the sort of like confusion, whatever you want to call it, comes from not having that certainty.
Right. You don't have some framework or shared understanding of what's actually important, so you can't make that decision.
Yeah. And then you tend to focus on the urgent stuff.
We've got to build Slack notification.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it hard getting alignment with your co-founder on that early on, or has that been hard, or what's that relationship like? Because you're both probably strong personalities, opinionated on the product.
Yeah. So we, I think in general we're very, because we'd had this shared experience of building the product the wrong way first. we then came out of it with with the sort of, so just to frame this, when we built the first product, we drank all of the Kool-Aid and followed all of the playbooks, and we basically built it as quickly as we could. We shipped it when we were like, super embarrassed about it. It was like the absolute classic lean startup MVP, all of the things, and it was so painful, and it made us make such short-term decisions because it was like, we've got to ship this thing.
Right.
Well, okay, are we going to build proper are we going to build like a proper transactional, consistent data structure, all of these things? It's like, well, no, that will take too long. We just got to ship it.
Yeah.
And so we did all of these things, and we really, really paid the price. And then when we came to wanting to move out of the market we were in, we just couldn't. The product couldn't support it, etc.
Yeah.
So when we went into the sort of, when we restarted and built Attio. Fun fact: our code base is called Phoenix.
Okay.
So
Rising from the ashes.
Exactly. So whenever a new engineer joins, they're like, "Why is the code base called Phoenix?" Now you know. And so when we did that, we both had this like very, very shared. We had scar tissue. We were like, we're not doing that again.
I don't want to go through that again.
So we're pretty highly aligned on that. Now, of course, the beautiful thing about my relationship with Alex is that we can have like really hardcore discussions, and it's absolutely fine. There is basically, there are very few people in the world that I can be so direct with as I am with Alex. And we can do that and have a conversation where most people would think like, well, they're never going to speak to each other again. It's terrible. And then it would just be like, cool.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, not even see you tomorrow. Like, want to get lunch? So it's like we are able to have these like, we have a very good relationship in that regard.
Right. Did you know early on it would be like that? Because you guys, you hired him, I think, early on.
Yeah. So Alex was hired as the first engineer. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it always clear like this, outside of just being a great talent, that this could blossom into like a co-founder relationship or
No,
something?
I mean, I think over the first 6 months of building, first year of building Funstack, it just became clearer and clearer that firstly he was a brilliant engineer, that we were able to work with each other really well, and that he, as well as being a brilliant engineer, was also extremely good at understanding the business aspects of running and building a startup. And all of those things combined made it a kind of no-brainer. Yeah.
That's awesome. You're trying to tackle this huge mission.
Yeah.
Would you say it's within you to be ambitious and to do adventurous things? Is there anything before you worked in venture capital or started Attio that is perhaps a little bit odd or not something everyone does?
Well, so I would say the I think it's a very unusual, like, so my dad is a brilliant entrepreneur, and he's an entrepreneur in the like truest sense of the word, in the sense that he is just one of those people that can just essentially solve pretty much any problem that he wants to. No like formal kind of business education or even university degree or anything like that. And so he started lots and lots of businesses, many of which have been really successful. And actually, like, just to give you a sense of how kind of entrepreneurial and free thinking he is, when he sold his last business, he sat down with the family and said, "I'm going to make a movie." And we were, we're like, oh, okay. What are you going to make a movie about? Yeah. And he said, well, there's this Bobby Wine, this artist, and this musician in Uganda, and he's going to run for president and all of this stuff. He said, I think it's going to be a really interesting movie. So he started making a movie, and boxes, cameras were arriving from Amazon and all of this stuff. And he was sort of like working with these cameramen in Uganda and all of this. And it was just going on for years and years and years. And he would sit there at his laptop, with these SD cards that we shipped from Uganda, and he'd be watching all the footage. And it was literally years of this. And but we were never allowed to see any of the footage or anything. It was like, oh, it's just uncut, it's nothing, blah blah. And after a couple of years, he started to cut it together. He started watching these little sequences, 30, 40 seconds, whatever, and they were absolutely brilliant. And and this kind of started to snowball to the extent that National Geographic and Disney approached him to buy the rights to the movie. And when that happened, they started to cut the movie together. It ended up getting nominated for an Oscar. And so he went from at the kitchen table, having never made a movie, to being like, hey, I'm just going to make a movie. Everyone being like, sure, whatever, to being an Oscar nominated director.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of gives you the mindset of the household that I grew up in, right? Which is just like, kind of like, just do it.
Yeah.
And so I think and also with no particular expertise in any of these things,
None.
but doing them very, very well and to the highest possible level. And so the mindset of, that I went into with building Funstack and then Attio was just like, I just kind of have to start, right? And having that, I was lucky that I was brought up with parents that kind of gave me that confidence just to do things.
Yeah.
And so I think that, if my siblings are all, none of them are kind of conventionally employed. So, my sister runs an Italian restaurant and a pottery, both really successful. My brother's starting a business at the moment. So it's very, that's just how, that was sort of, I always sort of thought that somehow I would some way start a company.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I was sort of like less concerned about following a traditional path. And I did a degree in computer science, which I guess now is potentially more obvious. At the time, I was just really, really interested in writing software and writing code. And so I did a computer science degree. But then after that, I had a very short stint as a software engineer before getting the opportunity to go and work for an anti-poaching organization in Kenya.
Yeah.
And I'd got my pilot's license at university, and there was this opportunity to go and live in East Africa, working for this anti-poaching organization, flying lots of small planes, having this kind of very different experience. And so I did that for like 18 months. Yeah. So it's a very meandering, unconventional path to,
It's one of those resumes when you see earlier on, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, one that we would screen out and be like, no, he's a wanderer.
Yeah.
And then actually, I think the kind of biggest fear I had going into the company, when we started the company, the biggest doubt I had was whether I could stick with something. And that was like actually the thing that I worried about the most, was like, is this something that I want to do for a really, really long time?
Yeah.
And I had so much fear about that, like about my inability to stick with stuff, because I was like, oh, just try this, that every time there was a moment when I probably should have stopped, I was like, no, continue.
Yeah.
And that actually, that sort of, for whatever reason, that kind of resilience to stopping was a big part. We talk about this pivot from Funstack to Attio and the kind of like, oh, there's all this opportunity and whatever. But along the way, there were just so many times when anyone sensible really should have, just should have stopped.
Right.
But for whatever reason, Alex and I just kind of pushed through the pain.
Kept going on. And you think one of the reasons was because, you had all these great varying experiences that you're like, no, I have to stick with something?
Well, one of the reasons was like, I think was again watching parents who built businesses go through real ups and downs,
Right.
and seeing and understanding that there was like this sort of roller coaster.
Yeah.
The other was like, again, one of the advantages, one of the reasons that maybe Attio could have only built in London was that for what I was doing at the time, there wasn't like an abundance of escape hatches. So, when if for example, we'd been building Funstack in Silicon Valley, we might know like 5 people who had great jobs for us,
Right.
or wanted to acquire the company or whatever.
Right.
Lots of reasons where we could have like taken a path which was not an independent company, but would have been a good path.
Right.
Those options just weren't available.
Yeah.
So the option was, if you stop, you're kind of starting from total scratch, right? And so at every junction, when there was a moment of uncertainty, it was like, well, this is probably better than like having nothing.
Yeah.
And so we persisted. And now, obviously, like in every cycle of that, the company got better and better. And now we're in the position where like actually we really enjoy building Attio. It's a very privileged position to be in. The company's doing very well. But it certainly was not like that all the time.
Yeah, you had to earn that. Is there any moment that you recall specifically where it was like, it would have been very easy, very understandable to have quit when you're trying to build this big, ambitious, company?
Oh, so many. I mean, there was like, I remember we used to use this platform called hired.com to find engineers. It was really good. It's a shame that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's a very good platform. And you would send, it was sort of like using Tinder or something, where you'd have these engineering profiles and you would be like, reach out, accept, it's like, didn't quite have the swiping mechanism, but other than that, it was like pretty much the same. And so you would send all these messages to all these engineers, and they were all looking for a job. So this wasn't cold outreach on LinkedIn.
Right.
This was like, I'm looking for a job. And you would write a blurb, and we would customize them. We would look at people's open source contributions and their GitHub and whatever. And we would spend like hours and hours doing this personalized outreach. And I remember one morning waking up to my inbox, and I had 20, just like a wall of rejections in my inbox. And it was just like, blah, 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 rejected, blah, 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 rejected. And there were just so many moments like that. And, this was like after months of really struggling to hire engineers.
Yeah.
There are moments when, early on when technically things were like really complicated. And there are so many moments when you just don't, like, the infrastructure isn't quite working, blah, blah. I mean, there were lots of moments where it was really difficult.
Yeah. You've built the product from the ground up to be built for the next generation. You were super dissatisfied with, Salesforce and all these other tools, and that they weren't doing enough and weren't built for the future. How is AI specifically changing the way products are being built and the way you're building the company?
Yeah. So I think first there's like 2 things to talk about here. One is how companies are being built, and therefore and how engineering teams build products. And then the second is how the actual products that you build are different. So I'll do the latter one first, which is how the products you build are different. So what's kind of cool for us is that the CRMs traditionally have been a system of record that people have sort of manually parsed, transcribed, unstructured data, conversations, emails, etc., into structured data for reporting.
Yeah.
So you would read an email and you would say, oh, they've unlikely to move ahead. Let's, do this. Or you would have a call, and then you would have to then go and fill in a little thing of what the outcome of the call. And so a lot of like the problem with CRM has been this translation layer. And you therefore need a human to do that. And it's very unrewarding because the reports aren't really for you, they're for your manager.
Right.
And so for the first time ever, you're able to build a CRM that doesn't require that. And that can actually now provide a utility to the end user. So that's pretty awesome, right? Because you can now be the system that does the transcription, that does the ingestion of all the information, synthesizes it, and can actually provide really helpful information for a user. And that is a massive, massive shift. The other thing which is really cool is that we have always been hyper-focused on automation. And we've been hyper-focused on automation because we, even when we first started building the product and, we were testing like GPT-3 and whatever, it was kind of clear that even with a little bit of good NLP or whatever you want to call it, you could do brilliant things with automation. And even then, we felt like the systems for automation were pretty rudimentary compared to what they could be. That's obviously now accelerated just to the nth degree. I mean, it's just extraordinary what can be done.
Right.
And the things that we can do now are, things like building these really complex PLG triage systems, which will go and do, account research, go and look at websites, go and look, synthesize product data, etc., to do things that previously would have been impossible or, highly labor intensive. And so from the perspective of the product we're able to build, it is sort of in the similar direction to where we started, but it is wildly more sophisticated than we thought it would be in this time frame.
Right.
So that's really cool. Building companies is also changing because we chatted a little bit about the way that you build companies, the way that you set goals or strategy or whatever you do for your company. And what we're essentially finding, if you think about things like broadly in kind of vision, mission, strategy, tactics, tasks, sort of layering like that, the task bit is becoming more and more automatable. The tools available for like defining tactics are again becoming, the productivity there is really increasing. And so the way that you think about your orgs is different. And, we spoke about, well, we like to have people who can absorb context and make decisions. This is like compounded by the fact that the task execution is becoming less manual. And so everyone can think at this slightly higher level. And so again, you don't want to necessarily build an org in a way where you have lots of people able to do lots of super defined tasks and then have to like very clinically push those tasks down to them. That you want people who can think in systems and who can build systems to accomplish tasks.
Right.
And who are, more sort of tactical, strategic, etc. And so, we think about that a lot. It's stuff like it has really big impacts in, if we get really specific, if we think about things like customer support. Gen AI LLMs are really, really good at answering a subsection of support tickets. They take up a lot of human time to be able to do that. And what that allows us to do is now use that human resource for more complex tickets and for like, not just, you could take the mindset of like, okay, great. Well, now we just need some more support people. I don't think it ever works out like that. I think in reality, the way it works out is, well, now the bar for support is just higher. Right. So now that those tasks can be done in an automated, efficient way, the expectations for the level of support have increased.
Right.
And so, we can again, we can kind of ramp that up, and we can provide, an even better support experience because now we have lots more free, our support team have more free time to go really deep into more complex problems. And I think that the interesting thing about all of these things that happen in when there's a big kind of massive innovation, it's never that we produce the same thing, but cheaper and, at a higher profit margin. It's that the expectations about the thing you can produce go up.
Right.
So what happens, like people think like, oh, now that this code is really easy to write, well, now you just need less engineers to build a software company. The reality is that the expectations about what software can do have just massively amped up.
Right.
So when we had, when you went from like cars being built by hand to cars being built by machines, we didn't just build the same cars with machines and just said like, oh, well, now there's only 4 people in the factory. In fact, the cars now are just way more complicated. They're way, way, way better. the product that we're getting is far more sophisticated. But car companies still employing a lot of people. And I think what we'll see with software as well is that the products that you have to deliver, the bar just has risen.
Yeah.
And so the expectations will just go up.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in a funny transition period. But I think the end products will just get better and better and better.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. That's also why you guys have spent so much time investing in the infrastructure and making sure you're ready, not just to add features, but to actually build a product that, works and has interactability.
And I think, the way that you build a product changes because the sort of the way that the LLM, coding agents or cursor or whatever work, will change the way that we think about software development. So I think, people will build software differently. We will structure our files and our code differently. And there'll be a lot of emphasis on kind of in code-based context and all those sorts of things. Potentially splitting code bases into kind of smaller subsections so that the LLM can hold all of the context in the code base and all those sorts of things. So I think we think deeply about how we have to change the way that we work to take full advantage of these tools as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of another interesting aspect.
That's so cool. I want to pivot a little bit to start talking about marketing and brand. I think you guys do a great job. You're just trying to disrupt a huge industry, and you need to have a pointy sort of point of view to be able to do that. You can't just be like every other product. Yeah. And the way you guys went about, years of development to be able to, build this new type of software. I'm curious. You've sort of taken a similar approach, I feel like, to marketing. What's the importance, and how has that changed over time at Attio? Yeah. How you've marketed and branded the product and the company.
Yeah. So CRM is an interesting category because people know that they need a CRM. Yeah. Most businesses have one. I mean, I think the stat is something like 90% of businesses over 10 people have a CRM or something crazy like that. So people go out every day to look for a CRM. It is a huge, huge, huge market. Payments, ERP, CRM, these are the sort of big software categories. Yeah. And because of that, there are really good competitors, big competitors. And you have a very different job in marketing. So marketing basically falls into two buckets, roughly. It's a why one problem. Why do you need one? Mm-hmm. So this might be
a frisbee.
Well, frisbee people know they want a frisbee. It's like, which frisbee do I want?
Okay, so
that falls into the why us category, right? So you probably you wouldn't see a frisbee advert that said frisbee is a fun sport that allows you to whatever. You'd see a frisbee advert that said our frisbee goes 40% faster.
Right.
If you're going to get a frisbee, make sure it's this one.
Right.
Right. And there are other categories where users don't know that the product even exists.
Right.
So this might be, if you, it might be like a new medicine, mm-hmm. or it might be, back when a vacuum cleaner was first created, you would have to educate the market. Right. An electronic device for removing dust from your home. Right. And then or Google with web search. Right. And then when you do that, your name becomes synonymous with that thing. Mm-hmm. So you Hoover your house. Yep. Because that was the first Hoover. Right. The first vacuum was a Hoover. Or you Google something because that's how people understood the problem. We are not in that space, right? We're very much in the space where people they know that they have this problem. They need to manage their customer data, build workflows around it. Mm-hmm. They want a CRM. And they are going out to find one. So the problem that we had was how do we explain to the market how our product is different, mm-hmm. and how do we build brand recognition essentially in a very kind of entrenched, pretty old school market. Yeah. And so a lot of what we focus on in marketing is that, and that that kind of really dictates what you should spend your time on, because you have to spend a lot of time on product marketing, mm-hmm. and telling people the difference between your product and the products that are out there. And you got to spend a lot of time on brand marketing. And so, those are areas that we've really focused on.
Yeah. How does that cultivate? I know what I really like is, it's such an entrenched industry, such an old industry where a lot of incumbents might not have something as simple as a change log that shows how quickly the product is adjusting to new features or new developments in the market. How does that manifest in the marketing aspect? Like, is it just every time there's a product update, you're pushing it heavily, or when you're doing outbound marketing, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, there a good exercise to do if you're kind of trying to figure this out is to work out what the persona of your brand is.
Mhm.
And so there are sort of like 12 archetypes or whatever it is, and we do this exercise to we kind of do this now. We redo this exercise every year or so, but when we first started, we really spent a lot of time doing this, which is like, what kind of brand are we? And we are, fundamentally, we're a creator brand. We allow people to create incredible go-to-market systems and processes.
Yeah.
And so we're very focused on people who are building businesses, and we want to support them. And so, we really resonate with the kind of creator, archetype.
Mhm.
And so, that again really helps us because it means that, well, we're a creator brand, we build things. We should build in public. We
Right.
should talk a lot about what we're building. We should talk a lot about how we help our customers build these incredible experiences and processes. Go-to-market is changing a lot. It's becoming much less siloed into sales, marketing, support. The way that people buy product, et cetera, is much more intertwined. It's a much more, the systems are more complex. And again, that again is something that we can really closely tie to this idea that we're this creator brand. We have, elements of the sort of elements of like David and Goliath in there, where we're the sort of, the scrappy underdog, et cetera. So that feeds into it. Mm-hmm. But once you have a really clear idea about what your brand represents, then the sort of things that you do to showcase that become more obvious.
Yeah, that's very interesting you said it, because that's, you guys did a huge Times Square campaign, which I think was really smart. You championed a lot of your customers, lots of builders. What was the decision like to do that? And does that relate back to, how quickly the world is changing and you're, trying to help your customers, similar to what you said about software, no-code AI, try to help your customers build instead of forcing a solution down their throat.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that campaign was interesting because there are it felt authentic,
right,
to us, and the people that we kind of that are our customers. So it's like it felt right from a brand perspective. But then what was also interesting about it is that it has that very specific distribution mechanisms, which I think are important, because as a startup, you don't necessarily have a huge audience.
Right.
The campaign was essentially we got 50 go-to-market influencers / customers to share their predictions about the future of CRM. Mm-hmm. We then worked with a New York-based illustrator to build a custom billboard per person. And we put that up in Times Square. Yeah. And we then had a photographer, which was there, took a photo of these people's illustrated faces with their quote, their name, where they worked, their business in Times Square. So they all got this incredible picture of their face over Times Square. And we then, gave it to them. And what's cool about this is, firstly, it's great for them because they feel this like recognition. And, it's really cool that we were able to do that for them. But what's also good from a distribution perspective is that they then share that. Right. And you hit all of their audiences as well. So you times that, you times someone's audiences by 50 and it becomes pretty impactful. Yeah. And it massively, that massively outweighed the social reach that we could generate as a brand by ourselves. And so it's, when you are a small company, you really have to come up with these kind of things. Yeah. And it worked really well for us. Yeah, it's super smart. And I think, you've kept a lot of the same elements where, you have a manifesto even in the manifesto, you've got a lot of statements from some of those people on, how the industry should be built. And you're really not just saying it, but you're championing them in a really loud way as well. Yeah. Yeah, it's really, I think lots of things are happening in SEO. I think lots of things are happening in email marketing, etc. It's really unclear where these channels are going. I mean, it's probably not going to be great. And so we think a lot about, what the future of audience building, of marketing looks like. And we think that, what we would just broadly term social or community is just becoming bigger and bigger. And actually now what's fascinating is that when we look at our biggest sources of signups, LinkedIn is now on par with Google.
Really?
Yeah.
And you guys are, and you're spending ads. You have ads on Google.
It's mostly not. We have ads on Google. We have some ads on LinkedIn. But when we just look at the sort of organic portion, LinkedIn is just massive.
How are you able to tap into that? Is it by having such a strong manifesto vision and being able to work so closely with creators and customers as well?
I think it's mostly it mostly comes back to, you got to build a product firstly that people feel this affinity towards, that they want to talk about. That's like number one.
3 years, 5+.
Yeah, but that's the thing you got to focus on first.
It's a given. You need to have that.
Yeah. As a secondary thing, you then want to make it easy for people to talk about it.
Right.
So we think a lot about how we kind of create content that is easy to digest and share. How we essentially help our customers to the extent that they want to go and talk about us. They have a great experience with the brand, etc. And you just do everything you can to foster this goodwill, these good experiences that then become these social moments. There's also a lot that we do in our own content creation. So we have, for example, an academy, which is where we share best practices, guides about how to use Attio, etc. Yep. We do a lot of workshops and webinars, and again, those do really well. But it's a whole production.
Yeah.
There's
little TV studio.
Yeah. There's once a week, basically our office gets converted, or part of our office gets converted into a mini TV studio. And so, yeah.
How do you allocate time, even as a founder and CEO or as a company for those projects? Like, I imagine at most companies, that'd be a hard pitch where it's like, hey, we're going to spend a bunch of time and money just talking about the product, like educating people, trying to help our customers, non-direct revenue marketing. Like, how do you view investing in those things and spending time on them?
Yeah, so this is why the way that you structure your E-team, your executive team, and the sort of mandate that they have is so important. Because if you have a mandate to hit a very specific target, these things can really often fall to the side, right?
Right.
The revenue leaders well, I just need this quarter, whatever. And there's these sort of cross-functional things like building an academy, which is not an obvious home for it, right? Is it marketing? Is it customer support? Is it what is it?
It's both.
Yeah, a bit of both, right? And so it's the sort of the nice thing about having an E-team whose mandate is just make the company better, is that we can come with a problem, which is several problems. One is we need to continue to grow our presence, and we need to create more content to get our to let people know about Attio. The other is people are trying to build really complicated things in our product. We could do a better job of helping them understand how to do that. Another one might be, in the next 12 months, we'd like to increase conversion rates. And one of the things that we know increases conversion rates is that if people build great workflows and automations. We had another one recently where we realized that people who use our research agent convert at a much higher rate. Once people have the aha moment of realizing that Attio can go and do account research and lead research automatically.
I don't have to do this anymore.
Exactly. That's a huge unlock, right? And so when you have all of these things as a team whose mandate is just make the company better, you can then start to build these programs.
Right.
And again, one of the nice things about our graduate program is that we now have lots of people in the company who are highly capable of delivering on these programs. And so we can run these experiments. A lot of them just start as experiments. They just start as, let's do 4 videos.
Right.
And let's see if they're impactful. Who's going to run it? Oh, well, this person and this person can work on it together. Let's try it for a month.
Yeah.
And so, and that's like how a lot of these things start, is just as ideas that get some buy-in. We then go and kind of cobble together a team. We run them as experiments, and then they become bigger things. Another really, another example of that is we work with SIs, system implementers.
Okay.
And so these are people external to Attio who go and help companies set up systems.
Right.
And this happened relatively organically, where Zev, who is in our who leads our implementation team, our internal implementation team, said, "Hey, customers are coming with a third party. I feel like we should help them."
Right.
And so we started a sort of informal program to help them. That started to pick up traction. We then had Shreya, who works in BizOps, was just like, okay, this is kind of snowballing.
Yeah.
Like, I'll build a program around this. Started to build a more serious program, and then it's now got to the point where that's become kind of a big deal. And we have now hired someone to actually turn that into its own thing.
Really?
And so, that's like, I think we're just quite comfortable with the idea that we will just run these experiments.
Yeah.
And as they grow, they can just be handed off to different people. And you don't have to go in with like, we want to do this thing, so we should go and hire a team to do it, etc.
Right.
We try to do the fastest, lightest weight, but good version of it.
Right.
To see if there's something there.
That's so interesting. That speaks like on a lot of things, like having a clear mission that will generate these ideas that will actually be beneficial for the customer and the product, hiring people with judgment and who are open to trying things out. What's the feedback loop like? You've got all these experiments running. How do you decide whether it's time to invest in one of them or kill them, or try new ones out? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so going into it, we try to have a rough idea about what what we would like to happen, but again, fairly open-minded, because we don't really, we don't want to set a specific metric, which is like, we want to have
X views on this.
Yeah, because then we don't want to create weird incentives, but we have an idea that, like, the expectation here is that we are helping, that. Well, let's talk about the SI thing.
Yeah.
The expectation here is that in a few months' time, we have 10 examples of customers having a great experience working with third parties.
Right.
And so we will start like that. And you get a sense of whether things work, pretty quickly. And sometimes it doesn't work, but you still feel it should, and you keep going. And I think, we've had a couple of examples where the first version wasn't quite right, but we had pretty strong conviction that there was something there. So we kind of reoriented, persisted, and it worked out. Yeah.
You forced it to work.
Yeah, basically.
Was there any one of those experiments that was surprising? Like with this one, the implementators, they came to you.
There are so many experiments that are surprising. One of a recent example is that we had in our onboarding flow, we ask people to connect their email and calendar.
Yep.
And the reason that we need to do that is because that's how the automatic building of your CRM happens. And it's how the ongoing intelligence works. So if I have a calendar invite with you, Attio knows about that.
Right.
We have that context. We can do lots of cool stuff with that. We can record, we can join your calls to record them, so you don't have to take notes, etc. So people have to connect their email and their calendar. If you do connect your email and calendar, then the difference of the experience you have in Attio is it's 10x better.
Right.
And so it's highly, highly, highly correlated with people becoming paid customers. Now, we tweaked around the edges of this for a while, and we basically got it to the point where about half people were connecting their calendar, and there's people converting it 5 times as much or 10 times as much than the people that weren't. And Alex who runs our marketing team, said, I have an idea for a copy change that I think will increase the calendar the calendar conversion, whatever. And I just it just seemed so small.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I mean, go for it. That seems like a good change, but this is not going to be impactful.
Yeah.
It was wildly impactful.
Yeah.
It was like, of all of the changes that we've ever made in the product, it was the thing that increased conversion rates the most.
Really, just a simple couple
and
of
words. It was like just a rewording of how we talk about the importance of connecting your calendar and your email.
Right.
And we have done things that lasted like 6 months that didn't move conversion rates that much. And this thing, which was like a one-line PR, whatever. It was like a tiny thing, a little tweak, move this around, put this here, put a blah, blah, blah. Has had the biggest impact of all of the things.
That's amazing. I think that speaks a bit to how quickly, not only just how quickly you're able to iterate, but also that you're empowering people to come with these changes. And because you've got such a strong idea of the mission and sort of goal of where the company should go in terms of product and servicing customers, like you can make those changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's Alex, for example, Alex leads the marketing team.
Yeah.
And so, but we still encourage Alex, as the leader of the marketing team, to have ideas about how the
onboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of onboarding, that reminds me, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I think when you guys launched initially, you had different levels of free trial, paid, and sign up. You guys experimented with that, I think, pretty quickly as well. Can you talk about how you went about discovering what the right sort of starting point for a user was when they began using Attio, especially when it's a huge market, people already have an expectation of how CRM should work, and that flow. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So Attio is is self-serve. Mm-hmm. We have we are a PLG business in the truest sense of the word. Mm-hmm. 99% of customers start by signing up for the product. When we first launched, we had, for no particular, there's not really any science behind this, but we wanted to have a free version of the product. Mm-hmm. And that was important because we wanted to, for many reasons. One was that we wanted people who were just starting businesses and didn't yet have financing, etc. We wanted them to be able to use our product.
Right.
And we take a big bet on small businesses that they will grow and become big ones. So we really wanted to capture that market. And we wanted to be competitive in the market. We had this mostly had this hypothesis that people would grow with the product and it would be worth investing in them. Mm-hmm. And so we started with a free plan, and that was very, very important. We've got to have this free plan. We then had a paid plan with kind of more features, more data enrichment, these kind of things. And that was, and initially the way that it worked is that when you signed up, you were on the free plan, and then you would hit a certain area of the product and you would convert to paid. The problem with that worked. I mean, it got us to a few million in revenue.
Right.
The problem with that, though, is we had a lot of people who didn't have the best experience going into the product because they're going into the free version of the product, not into the product with all of the things, all of the bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. And you kind of don't know if you even need them if you can't try them.
Right.
And so we wanted everyone to have the best experience going into the product. And we wanted everyone to be able to try all aspects of the best part of the product. So what we did is we changed it from, you go in and you go into the free plan. We changed it so that when you go in, when you sign up, you instantly go onto a trial of our pro plan.
Right.
And at the end of that, you can decide whether to continue with free or continue with pro.
Right.
And what that did was it meant that, an extra 30-40% of people at the end of the 2 weeks decided to go with pro. It was massive shift. And the reason was that they just found the value, right? So they were like, oh, okay, I do need these things. They're really helpful. Whereas before they just had there was just no way they could even know that. Yeah. And so that was a really big shift. it's for some reason, I don't know why, but the industry calls this a reverse trial. I guess you have a trial first, then you go to free if you want to. But it's worked really well for us.
Yeah. Was that, I'm curious behind the decision to do that, because you're making millions, things are working pretty well. What was the impetus to actually make a change there? Or was it one of these smaller experiments as well?
So when we were, the impetus was, this was a big change because it required us to do like a ton of, people don't talk about this, but like one of the hardest things to do in building products, and where like, the sort of the really difficult part of the code base is in billing.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't get talked about a lot because it's just everyone has it, you got to have it. But any change you make to the way that billing works is a huge thing. So this wasn't a kind of, let's just run an experiment. This was like, okay,
big.
Let's go deep into the billing system and move things around. The impetus was that we were speaking to people who didn't. You'd speak to people who were on the free plan, and we'd get on calls with them, and we're like, "How are you finding the product?" And they would say, "Oh, it's great, but I wish it did this." And it did do that thing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't on their plan.
Right.
And if they'd known it was available and there, they would have paid for it. And so we wanted to sort of shift everything so that everyone understood all the things that we could do from day one, and then opt in or opt out of needing them.
Yeah. That's incredible. I love that. Let's speak to your customers.
Yeah, like, exactly.
They'll tell you
it's
wonderful
an extraordinary
things.
hack. Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to get a little bit into, if you're okay with it, a couple of hot takes, like on specifically where you're building the startup, and then maybe a little bit about just how you're spending your time now and what you think about the future. But Attio is building in London. You didn't move to San Francisco within 3 days to make that.
Yeah.
You're building in Europe. Yeah. Why do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's a good idea. Again, this is very specific to me and the company that we're building. I think it's a good idea because, firstly, I want to live in Europe, and that means that I have my family here, my children, my wife, etc. And I also want to do this company for a very long time. So if I think about how one builds this company in a way that is going to allow me to do it for a long time,
right,
then that's important. Could move to San Francisco, but if that's not going to be something that you are sure you're going to be able to do for decades, then it's kind of at odds with this being something you really want to focus on.
Right.
That's number one. Well, it's one of the reasons. Another reason is that we started building the company in London, right? And at the time that we founded it, it would have been an impossibility to move to the US, mostly just because the US, immigration system is very complex and difficult to navigate, and we definitely wouldn't have been able to get an O1 visa or whatever. So we started the company in London, and we hired some absolutely brilliant people here. And that's important for two reasons. One is it gave us a lot of conviction about the market for talent. And two, we just had brilliant people already, and they had the most context, and we wanted to retain them.
Yeah.
And so, the more progress we made, the more people we hired, the bigger brand we built in London, our ability to hire more great people increased. The more traction we got, the less it felt like it was really important to move.
Right.
Now, what is really important is the American market, and 55% of our revenue, about 55%, comes from the US. So it is our biggest market by far. And we take it extremely, extremely seriously. And so what we're trying to do is build a company which understands the importance of the American market, which takes all of the best of Silicon Valley, which is insane ambition, unbelievable kind of, work ethic and hustle. Just this kind of like, this belief that things are possible.
Right.
So we try to take all of the best bits, be very present in the market, but also capture and sort of take advantage of what's really good about being here, which is incredible talent, and mostly around talent. And so we try to get all of those things. We try to take the upside from all of those places.
Yeah.
What that means for me as a founder, as the CEO, is a lot of travel.
Mm-hmm.
So we have got about 20 people we've got 70 people roughly in Europe and about 20 people in the US at the moment. And then I try to be there every 5 weeks.
Right.
Half of the executive team are in San Francisco. So the executive team are split between London and San Francisco. And so we have to build the company in a way that makes that work.
Right.
And it is working. So that's good. And we have to also, we have to build, much earlier than other companies would have to, a truly international organization.
Yeah.
So, we are, much earlier than other companies, we are billing in multiple currencies. We have entities in multiple countries, etc.
Right.
And that is actually quite a big tax that you pay as a startup. And,
right.
In the early days, this was a massive drag on us because as a small company, the last thing you want to do is have to do accounts in multiple places, payroll in multiple, like it is, doing that in one jurisdiction is a huge, big deal. But early on, as a seed stage Series A company, doing it in multiple jurisdictions is a huge, huge, huge drag.
Yeah.
If you get through it, though, you come out the other end as a company that can take advantage of, talent wherever it's best.
Yeah.
Incredible go-to-market talent that we're hiring in San Francisco, incredible engineering talent that we're hiring here in London and Europe. The ability to serve customers in all different regions. We bill in 3 currencies. We have support, almost globally now. So all of these things happened much earlier than they would otherwise, and I think we'll now start to reap the rewards.
Yeah.
But the initial kind of, it is definitely harder at the beginning.
Yeah.
Been much, much simpler if the company was just born in San Francisco. We could just hire people all there.
Yeah.
Everything's USD. Everyone's employed in California. That would have been much, much simpler. But I think like over the long term, this will work out really well for us.
So those early constraints actually can, at this point now, can provide an advantage where, the talent that is in Europe or in London that doesn't want to move has an option.
I think now the stage that we've got to now, if you look at sort of more, companies that are further down the line, like inevitably they're going to be in multiple jurisdictions. Inevitably, you're going to be selling globally.
Yeah. And
so at the later stage you get, the less important it is exactly where you are.
Right.
And I think a lot of what happens, a lot of what's great about what happens in San Francisco for very early stage companies, just the abundance of capital, the abundance of talent that wants to work at early stage companies. There are downsides to that too. It's very competitive for talent. People's tenures tend to be extremely short.
Right.
We spoke earlier about people being brilliant at sort of 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be at a company in San Francisco. People move really much, much more quickly.
Right.
And so, there are sort of pros and cons, but I think when you get to, as you get further down the road, these are problems that basically all companies face anyway. So they start to somewhat disappear.
Right. You're just more prepared already.
Yeah. You just solve them earlier.
There's so many directions I could take this in. 2 that I have in mind is one, you as a founder having such a long-term orientation and building the company around your natural drift. That's one. And I want to say the other one before I just forget it. And the other one is how do you actually go about in the early stages building such a disruptive company at scale when you have half the executive team in San Francisco? So I don't know which one of those you want to start with first, but I had to say it, otherwise I kicked myself. You've talked about building this company in Europe. You have your family in Europe. You want to be here for the long haul, and how that is a really important decision in building a company that's going to last decades. What decisions went into that? Like, what sort of decisions when you founded the company were really important to you and sort of helped you build the company in line with the way you wanted to live your life and the way your family wanted your family life to be? What sort of decisions did you make?
So I think the it was super clear from day one that it was going to be something that was an extraordinary amount of work, and that's good. That's what I wanted to do. And so with that in mind, with the you start a company. I mean, you don't start a company unless you're willing to just work an extraordinary amount, and you're completely eroding the barriers between work and this sort of idea of work-life balance is just completely non-existent. There is no barrier anymore, and so you have to sort of that's something that you sign up for, that you want. And then with that in mind, you sort of think about how that's actually feasible, right? So then you sort of think about like, well, I want to make this work. I want to work really, really hard. I want to build this company and this product. And so then you sort of think about what's necessary to do that. And so one of the things are, where are you going to be? And are you going to be somewhere where it's like possible to be there for a long time and really, really invest? So that's one thing. I think the other thing is making sure that you are very, very thoughtful about who your investors are. Again, it's a very long-term relationship. It's super, super important. And luckily I've been, because I had my sort of, my 2-year stint in venture capital, this was something I was hyper aware of, was that, investors kind of can be very impactful in a positive way and in a negative way.
Right.
And so again, we were just so thoughtful about who we worked with. And so we spoke about Ricardo and all of the reasons that we wanted to work with him. But then another one of our investors and board members, Alex Bard at Redpoint, has had a profound impact on the company in a very, very positive way. And again, that was something that we had to be very thoughtful about who that person that we were going to work with was.
Right.
And luckily we got that one right. But it's easy, I think like I have a lot of founder friends who weren't so lucky, and it's very painful.
What are those negative implications when you get that wrong?
Well, the thing is, like, it's hard enough to build a company. It's just like, it's a very, very difficult thing. And it's also, the expectations about the type of company you're going to build once you take capital is that this is going to be something that grows tremendously quickly, that returns a lot to investors, and you are committed to building a very big business. And so you have this, not only are you just trying to make a business work, you're trying to make it extremely big and grow really quickly. And that's very difficult. And there are moments where it's really, really stressful. So worst case scenario is that someone makes it more difficult, which definitely happens. You have an investor that actually makes it harder. They're nervous, they're highly opinionated, but with sort of unhelpful opinions or whatever. They waste time, etc. So in the worst case, it's really, really bad. In the sort of neutral case, or like, they're just, which is sort of fine, I guess. It's just that they're non, they're neither helpful nor detrimental. And then in the very rare case, people are genuinely helpful, and like actually make it easier for you to succeed.
Right.
And I think we're lucky because both of our board members fall into that category of being actually helpful and genuinely making the job of building this business easier.
Yeah. Awesome. How does all of this, the vision, the investors, the team, the years of building the product, let's imagine it's fast forward 10 years into the future, or 20, but let's stick with 10. What's that all result in? Where's this headed?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, there's that quote, right, which is like, we wildly overestimate what we'll do in a year, and wildly underestimate what we'll do in 5 years or something. So I think 10 years is for startups seems like an absolute eternity. But broadly, I would love Attio to be the de facto go-to-market platform for the world's best businesses. So I think we are building a product that is designed to scale, that is designed, from the ground up to be highly customizable, to run tons of automation, etc. And I think is very, very well placed for this next generation of software. And so from a sort of, the impact that I'd love us to be helping the world's best companies run their go-to-market motions. And the definition that we have of CRM is pretty broad. So I think especially with everything that's happening in AI, CRM will look really, really different then. And so that's what I hope we achieve from a product perspective and from a customer impact perspective. I really hope that Attio is a really brilliant company and a great place for people to work. So when I think about what impact I'd like the company to have, a lot of it is I would like Europe to have really brilliant tech companies, and I would like Europe to have great places for people who technical tech people to work. And so that's another really, really important aspect is Europe having a great tech sector.
Yeah.
And so I hope that in 5-10 years time, that's very much the case. I think that we're making good progress towards it.
Yeah.
There's some really, really exciting companies being built here. And let's hope
fingers crossed. Well, I mean, you're contributing, so that helps.
I hope so.
That's amazing. Is there anything else you want to touch on still? I think that is such a great point to leave it. I think, you've built this company from the ground up to be built for the future. And so, looking back at this in 5 to 10 years, I'm pretty confident we can say that Attio will be one of those companies
I hope so.
in Europe.
I hope so.
Awesome. Anything you want to touch on or point people in any specific direction for Attio or
Well, I mean, I think I just finished by saying that if you are in, we're looking for really great people to join us, and if you're in the US and Europe, etc., we hire in both places, and so if you kind of think that all of the things that have been said about the way that we build a company and the kind of people we're looking for resonate, then we'd love to chat to you.
Nick, thank you so much for coming. This was a ton of fun. Everybody go check out Attio. Like Nick mentioned, they're hiring. Subscribe, obviously, for more great content like this. And who knows, maybe in 5 to 10 years, we'll have to check in again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down for it. Thank you. That was fun.